Christopher Columbus's discovery changed the future. He didn't have a complete map, but what he did have was a bold vision. And he was confident that the journey he set out on would be worth it. It was. It led him to a new world. Hello, good morning and welcome. My name is Gabriel Byrne, and usually I act in films. You might have seen some of them: Usual Suspects, Miller's Crossing, In Treatment, many films. Anyway, I'm here this morning to, I suppose, explore with you some thoughts. We are living at the moment in a world of profound change. Political, social, economic, and spiritual. Seismic change that technology is helping to drive and define. And for those of us who are prepared for these changes, for this journey, there are equally profound opportunities. Do you wonder, like I do, what the world is going to look like in 2015? Look at the person next to you. Because you know what? It's in their imagination. Look around this room. There are 6,600 imaginations in this room alone, including yours, and yours over there. And in another, more than 40,000 with us this morning on the web. Welcome to them too. And springing from all these imaginations, there is a wealth of possibilities for your industries, for your companies. The PepsiCos, the Dells, the Walmarts, Citibanks, the Skullcandies, Centricas, Burton Snowboards, all the household names, and all the rising ones. And what about you? How do you think that your future will unfold? And where do you think that you and your business will be 4 or 5 years from now? One thing is certain: we have choices. And you can either make the future or you can be overtaken by it. I mean, we know this, don't we? I mean, we feel this in our bones. And those choices that we make will take us to one future reality or another. And these choices will affect not just our lives, but the lives of everybody around us. So the question is, how and what will you choose? Every one of us in one way or another are facing fierce challenges, urgencies, sweeping technological changes, where the velocity of data is building by the day. And how we have to manage, how we have to make sense of all that on the fly, in a world that is more volatile than it's ever been, and how we have to stay flexible through all the instability and all the unpredictability. In a world where our businesses and our lives are extremely interconnected, and how we are all subject, all of us, to the butterfly effect. That is the new normal. And one thing I think that we have learned is to never, ever underestimate the pace of innovation. It was seriously underestimated, I think, in 1989, wasn't it? 89, when the internet appeared to be just a group of portals with some potential. In the village where my father was born, I knew this old man, and I remember one day he talked to me about what he had seen in his lifetime. The invention of the motor car, the arrival of film, radio, and on a black and white television set, he saw the first man walk on the moon. He lived long enough to see the first PC and the internet. Each of these marvels he thought was the zenith of human achievement. There can't be anything else, he used to say. You know, at each great turn of technology, most people fell short of projecting just how much potential, how much progress would come on its heels, and how fast it was going to happen. Well, if those were big inflection points, we are at a really big one now. Because we have new quantum leap opportunities through two advancing technologies, mobility and the cloud, and a third breakthrough one that is still so spanking new, so glowing, and it feels like it's still smoking. I mean in-memory computing, the instant analysis of masses of fast-changing data, and I mean nanosecond fast for decision-making and running applications. As an artist, I suppose I tend to think in metaverse, so I think to myself, wow, cross-pollination, where this real-time data analysis, this in-memory computing meets and pollinates billions of mobile devices, meets and pollinates fresh cloud formations, and raises everything, and I mean everything, to a new level. If Einstein, I think, was still around, he might even give it a breakthrough formula, quantum physics style. Like an E equals MC times IMC squared, where E is any enterprise, M is mobile, C is the cloud, IMC is in-memory computing. But how we use that formula, that's where it gets really exciting. Okay, let's talk just for a moment about the what-ifs. Let's look together for a moment at what is being created by the uniting of cloud, mobile, and in-memory technologies, because that is what is going to change everything monumentally, and soon. And over the next coming months, seasons, over the next 2, 3 years, 4 years, it's all about hyper-processing power. Well, in-memory computing just multiplied yesterday's capabilities 127 times over, so that you can ask questions about your margins, your manufacturing mix, marketing, and get answers and insights 127 times faster. What it took 3 days to do before, it takes 3 minutes now. That's 4.6 billion records analyzed in less than 2 seconds, with data stored in RAM, accessed instantly through the cloud and anywhere mobilely. Okay, so what does that mean for your businesses, our lives, our industries? Okay, let's take healthcare, for example. Ask yourself this hypothetical question. What if your doctor could compare your unique health profile to a database of millions of other patients and identify a treatment most likely to work for your condition while you're still on the operating table? What if your local hospital could monitor every patient in their building in real time, real time, from their vitals to the meds to the insurance coverage, and make this data available on every doctor and administrator's mobile device so that each patient could be treated proactively and cost effectively? Think about that. Retail. Ask yourself, okay, let's say your favorite jacket was smart and could automatically reorder itself before it wore out, and not only arrive the same way it was made originally, but also adjusted to your current size, which could change. So what if a typhoon in Southeast Asia, for example, stopped the key shipment between your supplier in Taiwan and your factory in Toledo? But your global supply chain could immediately and automatically adjust and prevent any manufacturing delays. So no matter what happened, your customers always got what they wanted when they wanted it. How do you think that would affect their loyalty? Think about that. Financial services. Ask yourself this question. Let's say 10 different banks with your okay could tap into your financial picture and instantly offer you competing mortgages and enable you to choose and close on a house within minutes instead of weeks. Or if, heaven forbid, if you're in, let's say your house burned down and your insurance company had instant access to a virtual record of every item that you've lost and could cover the true full value in a fraction of the time. How do you think that this would redefine what's possible in the financial sector? I think that's something to think about. Okay. All these what ifs, all these scenarios, they're more than possible. They're probable. Because there are already companies on the case, investing, innovating around them. And so what about the rest of us? Do we jump in head and heart first? Or do we risk waiting and seeing? As the smartphone revolution showed us, the early learners, the visionaries, those people who adapted, they didn't wait. They saw the possibilities, they took the risk, and they reaped immense rewards. And what about the present? The present is already past. Everything from this second on out is future tense. The clock of the future, which ticks, 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 that will continue. So we have to start now. We have to start imagining our own possibilities. We have to stretch. We have to understand and embrace the harmonic convergence of these new technologies. We have to find the right partners, the right guides, ones with a bold and a shared vision, because you can't afford to get it wrong or go it alone. We must connect with these ideas and the inspiration that flows all around us. It must begin the minute you step outside this room. Take the what-ifs. Don't let them become if-onlys. Turn your what-ifs into why not? So that when you wake up on the morning of 2015, you and your business are writing the future that you imagined. So here's to all our futures and all the possible futures that we are going to create together.
Good morning. We just heard an extraordinary presentation from Gabriel Byrne. I'm Tom Stewart, and I have the honor of presenting and moderating a panel that will discuss some of the issues of the future of business. What we heard was about three extraordinary developments in the world of bits, in the world of technology. We heard about mobility, which will quadruple the number of people who have access to the internet, is quadrupling it as we speak. We heard about the cloud, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 16% and hockey sticking. We heard about what SAP calls in-memory computing and how it's going to drive quantum leaps in processing speed. But let's think also of the world of atoms. And before I bring our panel out, I want to just point out four megatrends in the world of atoms that will intersect with this world of bits. Think about the new demographics, for example. Thinking about the aging populations in the West and in Japan and now in China, and contrast that with the growing populations and the growing working age populations in India, Brazil, and various other countries. Enormous effects are going to spring from this demographic change. The Arab Spring is not a mere random event. It is also driven by the demographic phenomenon. Think about the fact that what we used to call developing and now call emerging economies will soon be fully fledged and emerged. At Booz & Company, we've calculated that only 52% of the 2,500 largest public companies in the world are now domiciled in the US and the OECD. Think about inclusiveness. If you look at the world's college-age population, college graduate population, only 17% are white and male. And think about issues of sustainability, not just about carbon and climate change, important as those are, but also generally about the issues of the company's relationship to society. We have an extraordinary group of four people here to discuss the future of business, and I'd like to invite them out onto the stage now. If you will, I'm not sure where they're going to come from. But Michio Kaku, who's known to many of you, one of the best-known faces in science, the co-founder of string field theory in 1974, currently involved in defining the theory of everything. He's a best-selling author, TV and radio host, whose latest book, The Physics of the Future, is a provocative exploration, do sit down, is a provocative exploration of what the next 100 years will look like. We're not going to go to that full time horizon, but we'll get out there. Next to him, Michael Schrage is a research fellow at the MIT Sloan School Center for Digital Business, a thought leader in the world of innovation, a regular contributor to Fortune, CIO Magazine, Harvard Business Review, Strategy and Business Magazine, the author of two critically acclaimed books, Serious Play, How the World's Best Companies Stimulate to Innovate, and Shared Minds on the New Technologies of Collaboration. Next to him, Isabel Aguilera is one of only two women to have ever been chosen as one of Fortune's top 50 most influential executives in the world. Formerly the chief executive in the Iberian Peninsula for Dell, Google, and General Electric, she's left megacorporations to start a startup called TwinDocs, a cloud-based service for protecting confidential information in the cloud. And finally, last but certainly not least, on my left, your right, Peter Diamandis is the chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation, which leads the world in designing large incentive prizes to drive radical breakthroughs for the benefit of humanity. You know of some of the X Prizes. He's funded the $10 billion X Prize for private spacecraft and for 100-mile-an-hour per gallon equivalent cars. Now launching new prizes in exploration, life sciences, education, and energy. So this is our panel. Our topic is the large topic, the future of business. And what I want to do is just begin by asking, I think I'm going to begin by asking Michio, if he would, take a look at science and the increasing capabilities of machines. And if you think about business as a sort of a balancing act between what people can do and what machines can do, what are we going to see in the next 10, 15, 20 years that in machine capability that is going to blow our minds and change the way business is done?
Well, we've just had a very successful space shuttle launch. Congratulations to the people at Kennedy Space Center. However, your cell phone today has more computer power than all of NASA in 1969 when they put 2 men on the moon. When I see these old videotapes of the NASA computers of 1969, 64 kilobyte computers, I say to myself, I wouldn't get into one of those space capsules given the computer technology back then. Well, that's Moore's law. Computer power doubles every 18 months. And it means that even the nature of capitalism itself is beginning to change into something that I call perfect capitalism. When you go into a store today, you're surrounded by products, but you don't know the exact price and value of these products. In the future, the internet will be in your eyeglasses, and beyond that, in your contact lens. When you blink, you will see all the products arrayed with all the prices. You will know exactly what things really cost. That's perfect capitalism. These glasses, by the way, and contact lens will also identify people's faces. You will always know who are you talking to. So at a cocktail party, you'll know exactly who to suck up to at any cocktail party. And the first people to buy these internet contact lenses will be college students studying for final examinations. They will blink and go online. Now, if you're a producer, on the other hand, you realize that brand loyalty is going to be put to the test. When people can see all prices inside their contact lens, it means that brand loyalty is going to be very, very important. You have to establish your brand, or else the consumer will instantly go to another product. But there's even another transition taking place, and that's a transition from commodity capitalism to intellectual capitalism. Tony Blair liked to say that England derives more revenue from rock and roll than it does the coal mining industry. That's because commodity prices like food have been dropping for 150 years. This morning, you had breakfast that the King of England could not have had 100 years ago. That's how cheap food is today because of mass production, better containerization. But the mind, you cannot mass produce the mind. And that's why intellectual capital is going to be more and more important for the economy. That means creativity, movies, artwork, software. That means the ability to produce creative, innovative, imaginative new products will be increasingly important in the new economy. And again, this is so profound. It's even changing the way the English language is spoken. When chips go into toys, for example, toys become intelligent, it's creating a problem for the English language, a contradiction in terms called smart Barbie dolls. Another contradiction in terms is Microsoft works. That is also a contradiction in terms. Now, I have ultimate respect for Microsoft. The point is that this revolution is thoroughgoing and profound. And it means that business has to keep up with these changes. It means that you have to have brand loyalty. It means you have to be in a different competitive environment where products change all the time with the speed of Moore's law. And remember also that in 10 years' time, Moore's law begins to slow down. And so we have to adjust again. Silicon Valley could become a rust belt in 10 years' time unless science can create a post-Silicon era.
So this leads me to a question that I want to throw to you, Peter, and see what you have. One of the things we've seen with Moore's law is that information processing becomes essentially free. Is there something else that might become essentially free? I mean, could energy become essentially free, for example? Or is there something else that is essentially free now that might become extraordinarily expensive? People talk about water being the new oil, for example, and think that water might get very expensive. As you look across, Peter, at these inputs, some of them physical and some of them informational, do you see any dramatic changes in pricing on something that we all rely on?
So ultimately, there's a few different things going on. First of all, at no time ever before has power been in the hands of single individuals and small groups like we have it today. It's only going to become more and more empowered. literally where small groups can do what only governments or large corporations could do in the past. We're going to start to see what I call an age of abundance coming online, where we spoke about the king of any nation having nowhere near the kind of capability we have today. So if you think about the underpinnings of Moore's law, giving us ultimately distributed health, education. I think if you think about energy production, you can look at what's going on to pick up on that. We're living in a time where the cost of solar energy is dropping at 30% per year.
The cost of solar is dropping 30%. It's still higher than
we're still not at a point of grid parity, but you've got a reduction of solar. You've got an exponential increase in solar production. If you stop and you realize that the Earth, in 1 hour, more energy hits the Earth than we consume as a species during the entire year. 6,000 times more energy flux hits the Earth's surface. If we start to convert that, what's interesting is that the doubling time on solar, at some point 20 years out, even though people don't believe it, we don't think exponentially, we think linearly, we're going to reach a point where the cost of solar is far less than the grid parity of coal. And then a couple of years later, all of a sudden, we end up with twice as much energy than we use on Earth, and then 4 times and 8 times. So what does the world look like when we have abundant energy? You know, we talk about water wars. Well, the fact of the matter is we have plenty of water on this planet. It just happens to be 97.3% salt water. If we can convert that to fresh water, we'll start all to have around this planet. That starts hitting health, and all of a sudden we are starting to live into an age of abundance where we've got all of us on this planet, energy, water, food, health, education. And that really begins to change the world. What happens when 1 billion new minds come online? What do they want? What are they going to produce? What are they going to consume? We're living at a point of rapid change in which billion-dollar companies are going to fold overnight and billion-dollar companies are going to come out of no place. It's dramatic.
So, Isabel, react to this. What we've heard are 2 sort of utopian visions. Right now, it seems like we've got a valley of the shadow of death to walk through before we get to, or a Sinai desert to go through before we get to whatever that promised land is. Pick your metaphor. What do you see as the big bumps that we might have on the road to this world of infinite choice of products, infinite food, infinite energy, this world of abundance? Do you think this is realistic, or is it, to use scientific languages, nonsense? Or if you think we actually can get there, what are the big bumps? Michael, both of you, but Isabel, start.
Well, I think that the massive use of technology somehow, because it's what both have been predicting, will give us the knowledge of using that model to predict other unknown hidden knowledge, like how the people react as a group, how we can predict or how can we expand the knowledge of our brains, because it's all related to networks and use of massive technologies. So we will be able to reach and to expand the knowledge of these unknown things, thanks to the expertise that we reach with the massive use of other technologies in other aspects of our lives. And that will be even a first step to further knowledge, because as soon as we develop the knowledge of our brain, that so far is used about 5 or 10%, just imagine how we can bump all this access to better technology, better energy, cheaper access to food or to education, to health.
So what I hear you saying, people like to say that one of your former employers, Google, I don't need to think, it's all in Google, Google is God, Google knows everything, and so on and so forth. But what you're also saying is we have the opportunity for what you might call an inner Google, if we could actually harness the network effects of the neurons that we already have. And you think technology will actually get us there rather than, as some people say, dumb us down, because I no longer have to memorize anything because I can look it up.
What I think is that there are similarities in the use of massive goods and the way other connections react. And we will apply that knowledge to prevent diseases. We will use that knowledge to expand and speed up education, what is really important.
Michael, what do you think?
Well, I now feel like I've been compelled and herded into being a contrarian. Of this.
Don't do it.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a contrarian without being a pessimist, because I'm very optimistic about what's going on, in no small part to network effects and the enabling influences of technology and the innovations of technology. That said, I think one of the best ways to take the future seriously is to take the past seriously. And my knowledge of the history of technology is such that I recall the phrase in the 1950s about energy being too cheap to meter. That was nuclear energy. The people in Japan don't think that's very funny right now. So I think that when one looks at the past, there are certain important things that can inform how we invest as a business in the future. Never confuse a clear view with a short distance. The issue here is not going to be, are we going to hit an age of abundance, or are there going to be the ability to harness network effects or intraocular embedded smart retinal implants. I think the issue is what kind of market mechanisms, what kind of regulations influence, encourage, and distort the way these things become opportunities. And I think one of the genius things about Google is that they've created something that appears to be free, but what is in fact the biggest innovation is not their algorithms, but the ability to creatively cross-subsidize their business. Mm-hmm. The changing infrastructure of the cloud transforms the way consumers, value chains, providers can choose or not choose to cross-subsidize their business. If I were a lawyer, I would say this creates interesting regulatory issues. But the point here is, we've talked about Moore's Law. I want to talk about a byproduct of Moore's Law that everybody in this room has experienced. The line between an infrastructure and an app has been blurred. Mobile blurs the distinction between a feature and an app. What's the difference between a product and a service when it's digitized? It becomes arbitrary. I like to joke about provises and surducts, service-flavored products and product-flavored services. The big point that I'm seeking to make here is not that the technology vision here presented is incorrect or inaccurate, but it is going to be the innovative exploitation of market mechanisms and markets that will allow them to come into being. And that's going to be as much a function of the design of business models as technical innovation.
And policy. I think policy, business models, and innovation.
Absolutely.
This reminds me, if you want to get into some of the more obscure but really increasingly relevant areas of strategy literature, you see some stuff about what are called two-sided markets. And a classic example of a two-sided market is a bank that takes in money from depositors and loans money out to borrowers. Another one would be a magazine that has subscribers and advertisers. And the ability to arbitrage across those or make choices across those. Do you have a high subscription price, a low subscription price? What do you do? On which of your revenue streams do you put your most important cash registers? And how do you make that choice? Is a really interesting strategy discipline that not too many people understand either in academic life or in the real world. And building up, and let alone in the world of policy that tries to say these are regulations and this. Isabel, I saw you nodding a lot during this. Were you nodding in violent agreement, or should we?
She has a crick in her neck.
No. I think that he's absolutely right. The big innovation about Google is not only having astonishing products. The big innovation is how to do business out of it. They call it monetize, but I think that real clue, the real innovation was a different business model. And it's based on a terrific product, great. But the real good thing is make us think about making money in a different way when other things are given, is how to add value on top of what is in Google, that is everything.
Alta Vista seemed like a pretty good search algorithm at one point, too. Yes?
Yeah, you mentioned speed bumps on the way to a digitopia. Let me mention two possible speed bumps. One is privacy concerns. Before 1989, the possibility of Big Brother was real. The internet was a military weapon. It was used to fight a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. So before 1989, Big Brother was a real possibility. But after '89, the National Science Foundation gave away the internet for free. Now the problem is not Big Brother, the problem is Little Brother. Pesky neighbors, cyber scammers, criminals. That's a real problem, okay? So I think privacy concerns are going to be more important because for every innovation, you have people who want to, bleed that innovation dry for criminal gains. The second problem, I think, is not a problem at all.
Criminals are innovators too, you know.
Yeah, that's the problem.
But yeah, what you're saying, what you're talking about is in the utopian world, it's a frictionless market, except you have a huge cybersecurity unit,
right,
which adds friction. Yeah.
Right. And the second problem, as I see it, is, well, people talk about a digital divide. We'll have the digital-rati and we'll have the digital poor. That never materialized because even today, teenagers, young kids are on the internet. If you're not on the internet and you're a kid, you don't exist. You don't have a Facebook, you don't have a Twitter file, you don't exist as a child. The digital divide is not the problem because access is getting cheaper and cheaper. The problem is jobs, because the economy is making a transition from commodity-based capital to intellectual capital. So there's pressure on the educational systems, and not every nation is educating their people for this new economy. So the jobs are important.
Do you think too many people go to college?
No, I think too few people go to college.
I disagree.
No,
but I think you've actually identified a business question, which is how are you going to employ the person who used to get a pretty good living at a General Motors plant and who cannot get a pretty good living now? And I think that's a question. Peter seems to have an idea about where we might find jobs for these people.
So I'll give you an example. One of the things that we're working on right now as a next X Prize we announced in partnership with Qualcomm that we're developing is called a Tricorder X Prize. And it's going to be a device that's got lab-on-a-chip capability. You can cough on it, you can do a blood finger prick, you can speak to it and so forth, and it can diagnose you. So you're going to start to have a disruption in the entire medical industry. What happens when this device is better than any group of board-certified doctors? And then all of a sudden, this device as well in a village in Africa to a minimally trained individual makes them the village doctor.
Right.
You can take that one step further and you're going to start to have AI-enabled and technology-enabled devices that basically take people up the employment curve and make them professionals. Of course, the pressure now becomes what will happen to the medical profession or the legal profession. Now, I happen to think getting rid of the legal profession is a good idea, but that's my own personal opinion. So the question really is, as we start to bring technology up, it's going to move a lot of people up and potentially out over the top. So it's creation of new jobs, but it's complete transformations of industries.
I agree completely with what Peter is saying in terms of technology-enabled, technology-driven, technology-facilitated economic growth and human capital employment. What I do not agree with, and I respectfully disagree with my university professor colleague, but certainly not my peer here, is that going to a university and getting a degree in sociology, even if you write really good essays, is not going to help your employer.
I agree.
Well, let's let Isabel. Isabel has been dying to enter this debate, and let me make sure that she does.
I think that our real problem is consistency. We have reached a level of technology, and we have achieved a level of access to information, but we still have the same regulation. We have still the same admiration for large companies. You have mentioned that only 52% of the largest companies in the world are Americans. When the real revolution comes from the individual power, and we really will surpass this crisis with the power of many, with the real, it's not only the crowd wisdom that we can debate afterwards if you want, but it's also the power of small entrepreneurs, small companies, and we are still dealing with the same ways of education, first problem, same ways, and in that type of, or in that way, I agree with you that university perhaps is not is enough at the level that we have today.
Maybe Instituto de Empresa,
Yeah.
not other things.
And then also the same way of getting the money or getting the resources to go live, you know, and that lack of consistency is what are making us suffer. And that is what we really need to change. That is the next generation. We have to, as Google did, we have to find a new way of improving and taking advantage of all the capabilities that we have now for free.
So let me ask you a question which you've sort of raised. 10 years ago, I think, our in many cases, mutual friend Paul Sappho told me, it was more than that, it was 15, said that called the internet a full employment act for entrepreneurs. I think you could now say, you could use that phrase again about the cloud and mobility. You could say these are also new opportunities for a full employment act for entrepreneurs. But the question is, as we see the rollout of technologies and also as we see the continued story of globalization, and like the internet, you know, globalization is a 25-year-old story and you ain't seen nothing yet. As we see these roll out, are we seeing more in the business of the future? Are we going to see large companies? Will large companies still play as big a role in the business ecosystem that they do now? Or will we see many more small companies networked together? Is it a big company future or a small company future?
The answer to that question, of course, is yes, but I think that you framed it in exactly the wrong way. Because you're going to have very large companies that don't employ a fraction of the people that large companies employed in the year 2000.
So sales huge, employment small.
The revenue to employee ratio is going to be transformed because of the brilliant innovations from people like SAP and the entrepreneurs represented here. And the one other area where I'm going to disagree with Professor Kaku is, you know, you can't mass produce minds. Forgive me, but my serious academic background was AI. You know, and if there's anything that we're focusing on, it's the ability to algorithmize, to use technology as a vehicle to either leverage individual minds or to usefully and cost-effectively automate or augment how people make decisions and how people create. So the economics are being transformed for this, and I think it's going to be a very interesting challenge how people are going to find jobs. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I know what the answer is not. The answer is not 4 years in college.
I'm going to pick a little quarrel with the word jobs because I think that may be the model that doesn't work.
I thought you meant Steve Jobs. Sorry.
No, well, one never picks a quarrel with him. But it may just be that the idea that for those of us who are Americans, the idea that the choice between a W-2 and a W-9 may just become a different choice in terms of how you add value. But yes.
Yeah, I must disagree with my esteemed colleague here. Okay. First of all, let me say that science is the engine of prosperity. From steam power to electricity to the laser to the transistor to the computer.
That's not true.
We're talking about, hey, can I have my say? Okay. Sure. You had your say. Let me have my say.
Yes.
However, the information revolution has a weakness, and the weakness is precisely the educational system. The United States has the worst educational system known to science. Our graduates compete regularly at the level of third world countries. So how come the scientific establishment of the United States doesn't collapse? If we're producing a generation of dummies, if the stupid index of America keeps rising every year, just watch network television and reality shows, right? How come the scientific establishment of the United States doesn't collapse? Let me tell you something. Some of you may not know this. America has a secret weapon. That secret weapon is the H-1B. Without the H-1B, the scientific establishment of this country would collapse. Forget about Google. Forget about Silicon Valley. There would be no Silicon Valley without the H-1B. And you know what the H-1B is? It's the genius visa, okay? You realize that in the United States, 50% of all PhD candidates are foreign-born. At my system, one of the biggest in the United States, 100% of the PhD candidates are foreign-born. The United States is a magnet sucking up all the brains of the world, but now the brains are going back. Right. They're going back to China. They're going back to India. And people are saying, oh my God, there's a Silicon Valley in India now. Oh my God, there's a Silicon Valley in China. Duh. Where did it come from? It came from the United States. So don't tell me that science isn't the engine of prosperity. You remove the H-1B visa and you collapse the economy. In Wall Street Journal, editorialized against a congressman who wanted to ban the H-1B, saying they'll take jobs away from the American people. The Wall Street Journal said, look, there are no Americans who can take these jobs. These are at the highest level of high technology. They don't take away jobs for Americans. They create entire industries. And so that's why we have an Achilles heel, and that's the educational system. And again, sociology majors are not necessarily going to be the ones determining the future of Silicon Valley, but physicists, engineers. We need more of them, not less.
The irony is, I agree with the immigration issues, what you're saying, and I'm at a school, of course, and Peter's a graduate of a school where indeed immigration.
Your school wouldn't exist without the H-1B.
Of course, but I'm not.
We've got to get back to the future of business.
But hold on a second. I'm not. No. I'm not arguing against an H-1B. I completely agree with this issue, and the point on the future of business that he's making, which is very, very important, is the nature of human capital. What is misunderstood here is, again, how poorly run schools are. MIT is a notable exception in this regard. His school is not, because what happens is they run in these introductory science and engineering classes at Illinois and Wisconsin and Michigan. They run freshman and sophomore years as flunk-out operations. They run it as a boot camp, and then people are surprised that people don't take science, that they don't take the STEM courses. The point that I'm trying to make, which I think is an important one in this regard, is that the way educational systems are set up right now is that we have distorted incentives that undermine the ability for America to have a homegrown science and technology center. Immigration is a wonderful child of immigrants.
I want to move this just a second. I want to move this from an American conversation to a global conversation. It is a global economy and so on. I mean, obviously, to those of us who are Americans, this matters hugely politically. But as we talk about the future of business, one pretty clear thing is that it's going to be increasingly borderless. And one of the questions we sort of want to ask is, if you're wearing your CEO hat, some of these implications might be where you're going to put your headquarters. Are you going to put your headquarters in Bangalore or in Buenos Aires or in Silicon Valley? You've got a lot of issues around that. But I'd like to move it to that. Peter, you had your hand up first, and I know you want to comment on this, and then I want to start asking about some questions about where the big industries will be in the future. But yeah.
So to bring this back to the focus on SAP and mobility and cloud, the fact of the matter is that the rate of changing is increasing. The rate of change is increasing, period. And we're working into a day and age where the ability for, again, an individual or a small team to innovate and build a company is greater than ever before. The cloud and mobile computing, 3D printing, AI-enabled capabilities are going to allow for the birth of extraordinary industries. And the fact of the matter is, there is no industry that's safe. Medicine, I just got finished speaking to a group of 500 medical CEOs. Over the next 10 years, medicine is going to be completely redefined. And the fact of the matter is that when regulations are holding an industry back, like it is in medicine, it simply means it's going to be redefined in a different country. There are no boundaries anymore. Companies are multinational. Individuals are multinational. Ideas go across the globe at the speed of light. And we're going to see a rate of change that is not stopped by regulation, especially when governments can no longer regulate at the speed of change that's going on right now. So I think you're doing a pretty good job from where I sit.
And it may actually be interesting to see, for example, one of the most regulated industries in the world is education. And the education industry itself is not immune from these disruptive forces. But Isabel, you wanted to comment, and if I may, what I'd like to do is I'd like to exploit your gender to say, let's talk a little bit about the role of women in the corporation of the future. And I hate to just put you on the representative spot, but you're on it. But as we think about some of these issues, let's talk about half of humanity, and is there a particular, are there things that we need to bear in mind as we look at the business in 10, 15 years? Are we going to see a step change finally in the participation of women in corporate life or in economic life generally?
Well, let's say that thanks to SAP and other technologies, technology is the best friend of a woman. So probably companies will be more transparent, will be more meritocratic. So let's back to technology, which is more interesting than this topic. And
okay.
I will continue his thoughts, and collect yours, because big companies will have less employees, and perhaps the reduction will come on the headquarters, because thanks to technology, we can have centralized processes, but not centralized headquarters. It can be decentralized. And that's part of the changes that we will have to face in the future, how to learn to deal without headquarters, because people and talent will be distributed all over the world.
So the old centralization, decentralization debate is over. It's the wrong debate now. We can centralize and decentralize just as we can do business models in whole new ways.
That depends, according to efficiency, we will decide what to centralize, and according to the reach that we want to get, we will decentralize some other activities that make sense. But, it has nothing to do with a physical, big building, large people, that is somehow
So if I put on my consultant hat, it's a 2x2 with efficiency and reach, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I have to do a 2x2 up, right? And so we have efficiency and we have reach and we have centralization and we have different solutions in organization design depending on how we make those trade-offs.
And new capabilities, because we will need to coordinate and to communicate in a different way.
I'd like to raise the larger issue of globalization, because that's what we're tiptoeing around. Let me give you two examples of globalization, Japan and India. In Japan, we have, in some sense, a negative example, where we have very large corporations that are incapable of making very small, rapid changes to the economy. And one reason why the Japanese economy is stagnating is because of the sclerotic distribution of goods, the fact that competition is not allowed. Rice, for example, is artificially propped up. It means that you cannot have a free marketplace. And that's one reason for the stagnation of Japan for the last 15 years. Now look at India. There was a big debate years ago in India about whether or not to set up an optical fiber network connecting India with the rest of the world. Fiber optic, state-of-the-art. People said it's too much money. It's useless. India doesn't need such a thing. And now look, that is the lifeline, the lifeblood. The lifeblood of the new generation of Silicon Valleys in India is precisely because of the investment they made in the highest technology, getting fiber optic cables and getting India wired up to the rest of the world. And that's a challenge for all businesses, all nations. The playing field is going to be global. The playing field is going to be international. And unless you can compete on the international stage, you're going to be out faster than you realize. Because, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you would finish, so I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So what I'm saying is, in a situation where we have perfect capitalism, perfect knowledge, a knowledge about all products, goods, services, marketing, people's instincts to buy, and so on and so forth. In a situation where we have perfect capitalism, perfect knowledge, it means there's going to be enormous pressure on the global marketplace. And nations which cannot compete are going to see their economies stagnate, like what happened in Japan.
So let me ask you this question. We don't have too much time left, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to give each of you a choice between two questions. Answer one, or if you can answer the two at the same time, and what it is. One question is if the sort of venture fairy came down and gave you a large sum of money, whatever a large sum of money is, $1 billion, $100 million. If you had a big amount of money to invest, where would you put it? And the second question is more about organizations. If you go back 100 years ago, people working in groups did not know how to create or run multi-divisional corporations. That's something we now know. If you go back 25 years ago, people did not know that they could create an encyclopedia or create an operating system without a corporation. So we have new forms of collaboration. What new form of collaboration might exist in 20, 25 years that we can barely imagine now. So one question is, where would you bet? And the other question is, do you think that mankind, humankind, will be able to collaborate in some striking new way in the future? And you can pick either or both or whatever, but who wants to grab it?
I'll start, be very quick on this. The first one on the 100 million is easy. I bet on people. You know, there are certain people, and I think the difference between now and 20 years ago is between LinkedIn, Facebook, and Google, the new genres of social media. My span of knowledge, my span of influence, my reach has been dramatically changed. So the whole notion of what it means to bet on people has been globalized, with or without H-1B visas. The collaboration issue, I've written a book on collaboration, and I want to come at that question from an orthogonal attack. What I think is a profound revolution, and I hate that phrase, but it is a profound revolution, is that when I went to school, the engineering paradigm was systems integration. Now what we see is, and what the cloud is a manifestation of, is interoperable systems. Interoperability is going to be the vehicle and medium for linking medical devices to IT, to new materials. Having APIs, new genres of interoperability are going to facilitate new genres of collaboration and innovation.
Yeah, I would bet on 3 industries that are going to be big. One is biotech. In the coming years, all of us will have a CD-ROM with every single gene in our body listed. It'll cost about $1,000 in a few years. It'll cost $100 perhaps in 10 years' time. That's going to open up bioinformatics. It's going to revolutionize medicine. Medicine is going to be reduced to computer science. Computer science will dominate almost all medicine in the future. We'll have a human body shop, able to grow new organs of the body, extend the human lifespan, control cancer. We're talking about a revolution in biotech. Second is entertainment. Entertainment is going to be huge in the future because everyone likes to laugh, everyone likes to communicate, and entertainment is intellectual capital. Robots cannot make intellectual capital. Entertainment is something that is going to be huge. Social networks, all of that is going to be wrapped up into the gigantic entertainment industry. And third, further down the line, maybe in 20, 30 years, robotics is going to be big. I think it's going to be bigger than the automobile industry, but not today. Our most advanced robots today have the intelligence of a cockroach, a stupid cockroach.
Isabel.
If I were rich, I would spread the money, because I don't think that putting too much money on any small company is good for them. I think that you know, the intellectual goes faster when you have to speed up the resources and to improve the resources that you are given. But I will choose something to do with crowdfunding or something to do with cloud learning, because we need to speed up the way we learn. We invest 20% of our life in just learning. We will have to continue learning all our life, but just learning, we invest 20% of our life, and that's perhaps too much for the future. Something to do with recycling, because we are going to be much more people consuming much more goods, so probably something about recycling, something about water, because it's the new goal of the future. And something to prevent diseases, or something to early diagnosis of diseases. And what I imagine for the next 20 years is some way to improve our delivering cycle. You know, we spend 20% of our life just learning, when we are more productive, more imaginative, and then the last 20% yeah, on the entertainment business, but on the other side. So I would like to see how can we improve 40% of our lives in a more efficient way.
Peter, give you the last word, except for mine.
3 years ago, Ray Kurzweil and I started a new university called Singularity University in Silicon Valley to look at exponentially growing technologies and how they affect businesses and individuals. And we challenge our graduate students to build a company that can affect 1 billion people within 10 years. That's the metric for success. And we looked at these next decades. In this next decade, as you said, biotech, cloud computing, and then the Internet of Everything, embedded network systems are going to give birth to the next $100 billion industries. The decade after that, distributed manufacturing, 3D printing, AI, robotics are going to give birth to multi-hundred-billion-dollar industries. And the decade after that, we start to really play into the nanomaterials, nanotechnology arena. Each of these decades, again, disruptive and amazing potential for transforming humanity.
And boy, the difference. Right now, 6 of the top 10 companies in the Fortune Global 500 are energy companies. And I don't imagine that that will be true at the end of any one of those decades as we go forward. We're just about out of time. I want to try to summarize a couple of themes that I heard and put them in a little bit of different context. One, as Gabriel Byrne said at the beginning when he was talking about the imaginations in this room and the imaginations on the web and the imaginations around the world, is the power of intellectual capital, the power of creativity, the power of the people in whom you might invest in a world in which we're surrounded by systems and by a seemingly ever-growing computing power, the power of the individual and collective intelligence as an economic engine seems to be paradoxically rising enormously. Second, the theme of urbanization. In the next 20 years, in the coming decades, there will be more city building than in the whole history of humankind beforehand. That represents, we've calculated, about a $350 trillion business opportunity. It shows up in many of the industries described here, but think of that opportunity as the biggest B2B play in the history of capitalism. The biggest B2C play in the history of capitalism we've also talked about indirectly, which is the emergence of a global middle class and a truly global middle class. The Gen Y, the millennial generation, in sheer numbers is the biggest generation ever to exist, and by 2030, 85% of the global middle class will live in Brazil, Russia, India, and China. That's a lot of households to furnish, a lot of tourists to fleece, a lot of makeup and household goods to sell. It's an extraordinary B2C opportunity. And a third one that we sort of mentioned, and even though Isabel said it was boring, I want to bring it up, is what I like to think of as the third billion. If women ever fully enter into economic life as talent, as participants in corporations, or as consumers, it will be the equivalent of adding another India or China to the global economy, a non-trivial addition. And all of these things play into those. I think of those things as 3 huge opportunities, and we've heard an awful lot about how industry might reconfigure itself in order to take advantage of those opportunities. Based on all you've heard this morning, it's apparent that technology is going to change our world and our organizations in the years to come, and we've got to be ready. These next few days are an opportunity for you to explore how you can ready your business for the future now. I'd like to invite you on SAP's behalf to attend ASUG's keynote session this afternoon with guest speaker Michael Eisner, which will be followed by a special ASUG 20th anniversary celebration. Before I let you go, I want to ask you to join me in thanking this extraordinary panel for a conversation that was just brilliant. Thank you very much. And now, to all of you there and those attending virtually, we wish you a wonderful Sapphire Now.